All right, g'day Novocastrians. Welcome to a very special episode of the Jetstream. Today, we're very pleased and thankful to be joined by the new executive chairman for the Newcastle Jets, Shane Mattiske. Shane, thank you very much for joining us and making your time available.
Oh, thanks, Grant. It's good to be. This is of course my first time on the Jetstream, but I'm pleased to be here, and it's a great opportunity for me and for the club, the new club, to be able to talk to its fans through this means.
Fantastic, mate. Really appreciate it. And we'll try not to throw too many curly questions at you. We do have a fair number of questions from across social media and on our forums. We'll get to those in a minute. Just want to give us a bit of a background about yourself. What sort of background do you come from? Obviously, we know you were formerly involved with the NRL and the Rugby Australia, but what's the Shane story? Where's your background, and what do you do outside of sports management?
Yeah, all right. Well, you can see probably a picture of a cyclist in the background, so I like my cycling. But originally I'm from the bush, central west New South Wales. My family, one side of my family originally was from Charleston, actually, so I've got links into the area and have been coming up ever since I was a little kid to Charlestown and Lake Macquarie in the region. So I know the town, the area, and I'm really enjoying actually coming back into the kind of the new Newcastle region, because it is extraordinary. It's a great city, and some awesome development and very livable. And yeah, in the week that I've been here, I'm loving that and looking forward to being part of it. I've been, in probably the last 20 years, have been working across all of sport. So big chunk of time with the NRL, and of course up and down the freeway to see the Knights and to, understand the community here from their point of view. But in Nielsen Sport, which is the company that I was at, they're a kind of an organisation that consults across all of sport. So the interesting thing for me there was getting involved in some of the sports that are Melbourne-based. We had an office in Melbourne. I was going back and forward dealing with AFL head office and some of the teams in the AFL, Tennis Australia, and NBL, and pretty much most of the sports in this country, and actually New Zealand as well. So I feel like I've got a pretty good feel for the sports landscape. I worked with David Gallop, of course, at the NRL, so I followed his path, and did a bit of work with what was the FFA, particularly in leading into this broadcast deal that's just coming to an end. So worked with David on that and his team. Feel like I've been close to football, but this is definitely my first time deeply in football, and it's my first time running a club. And whilst I've been involved in membership and the digital platforms, the NRL, and broader strategy, etc., and across all other sports, it's actually really nice to have a team. Like Friday night was the first time I'd rocked up to a ground, and I've been to plenty of grounds for countless games, but it was the first time that I really felt an emotional connection and cared about the outcome of that team, and that's pretty special.
Oh, great, good stuff. Do you have a sporting teams? Have you sort of kept your hands off and been involved in more of a sort of separate capacity to that? Do you have a team you support?
I've got lots of. Probably the answer is, at a professional level, I've always had to be a little neutral. There's teams that I've had soft spots for, but most of the time it's been looking to teams that were the underdogs or that had particular struggles or that I've been involved with in terms of their strategies and seeing them succeed. Certainly followed the paths of different players.
With underdogs with us, so you've done well there.
Yeah. But look, this is one of the things that I really am enjoying about the role here with Newcastle, because I can see there's real opportunity, and there's some great, from a strategic point of view, there's some great things that the club can do, and it's got a great foundation, and that challenge is really motivating, and it will be rewarding. So I'm looking forward to this fresh start and a new experience for me.
Are you in Newcastle at the moment, or will you be relocating, or will you be commuting from wherever you're residing?
Well, I've got my family's here in Sydney, so I'll be sort of splitting my time. So I'm making on the path in here. When I was committing into the role, I had various discussions with the owners, and I know that it has to be a real commitment. So I will be in Newcastle at least, I reckon it'll be 3, 4 or 5 days a week. And right now it's definitely going to be more the latter. It'll be a very significant commitment. But as time goes on and we get some stability, hopefully I'll be able to balance it a little more. And the flip side of that is there's a lot of the stakeholders, obviously, for football that are here Sydney-based as well. So whether that's sponsorship, whether it's talking to Venues New South Wales who are based here in Sydney, or whether it's FA and the APL co, that gives me an ability to manage both sides.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Well, maybe give us a bit of a timeline. I suppose it seemed that once the unbundling from with the A League and the FA took place, or was officially announced on New Year's Eve, this action was taken very quickly. Was it something? Obviously, whatever. And we'll preface all of these questions by saying Shane will go into as much detail as he can, but some things may not be able to be discussed in a public forum, and we completely understand that. So Shane will give as much detail as he feels comfortable doing. What was sort of the timeline from when you became involved, and the timeline you understood where this decision was taken, and because these sorts of things wouldn't happen overnight. This would be something that would probably have been bubbling along for a little while. Obviously, the issues with the Jets have been going on for over 12 months. So when were you sort of brought on board, and what was the sort of time frame that took place once the new entity was decided and everything, the ball got rolling?
Yeah, I guess there's kind of two angles here, two parallel questions in that, because the issues with Martin Lee and the old ownership of the Jets has been that they have been going on for a long time, and talking to FA, it's clear that there were concerns, and those concerns evolved to the point where the FA was starting to issue breach notices to Martin. And my understanding, this is before my time, but my understanding is that's been happening for 4 or 5 months. And I think the FA's media release, when the licence was taken off Martin, kind of confirmed that, basically, that this isn't something new. It's not something that's just popped up in the short term. It's been something that's been happening for quite a while. And of course, because the FA's been focused on it, the other clubs also have been aware of this, and particularly as you start to think about the unbundling of the APL from FA has only just happened in the last couple of weeks, but that's also been something that has been worked through for the last 12 months as well. So the clubs that have been involved, I think, particularly the clubs that have been driving, that have been aware of the concerns. So they knew that something needed to be done. They were hoping that Martin would fund the club properly and give it stability, but as time's gone by, clearly that hasn't happened. And yeah, all this has come to a head clearly in the break. So obviously, new season starting, and I think for the Jets fans, you will have seen, since the highs of 3 years ago, this loss of players, and just the failure for the club to be able to invest, whether that's investing on the field or off the field. So that's, of course, a concern as well, because the APL clubs, I know, want a strong competition, and they want Newcastle to be strong as part of that strong competition. So they I think, would have been, no doubt, aware of this and would have hoped that something had happened. And of course, as it became clear that the FA was going to terminate the licence, the question comes up: well, what's the path forward? How do we bring stability to the club? And the clubs that have been involved, the 4 APL clubs or A-League clubs that have stepped in, they've seen the importance of Newcastle, but they also see the value that sits here there's a very strong foundation in Newcastle. I think because they're A-League clubs, they know that, they can see that, they can see the participation base in this region, and it's a very big region, and it's a very strong region for football. They can see the fan base, and there's very loyal and passionate fans that exist around this team, and they're, in a lot of ways, I think, fans that other clubs would be jealous. They'd be jealous of that relationship that exists around the Jets. So they were motivators for the 4 APL clubs to come in and provide this stability. And I think they have comfort in talking to them. I know they have comfort that this is an investment they're making that will be rewarded, that there is a strong foundation here. And if they do invest wisely and put the right people in place and put the right strategies in place, then this is a region that will deliver that sustainability and growth for the club broadly, and will put it in a position whereby you can start to make other decisions around how do you evolve that ownership model, and ultimately deliver value back to the region.
And the other part of that question, obviously, was when the timeline on when you became
Sure.
with the whole process.
Yeah, and to answer that, that was really just before Christmas. So I've come in relatively quickly. It's been a fast ramp up for me. So I think it became clear, probably to the clubs just pre-Christmas, that something was likely to happen. I was engaged into those conversations with no surety on. It was almost, I think there was an element there of, this may happen. Let's get prepared, but no absolute certainty on timing, etc. And of course, yeah, you know the timeline from there on.
Yep. All right. We've had absolute plethora of questions come in via NewcastleFootball.net forums, the Twitter and the various Facebook groups that we posted asking for questions for this AMA. So we really thank everybody for posting those questions. I'm going to ask. A lot of the questions got doubled up and as slightly different variations, and it's going to be a little bit too difficult for me to shout at everybody that submitted questions. But I just want to give a blanket thank you to everybody who posted across those various areas questions. We will be asking as many of these as we can in the time we've got allotted with Shane. So the question or the comment you made before about investment is probably a good place to start. As far as the debts go that were attached to the club, obviously under the old entity, what if any of those carry across to the new, and will there be any issues going forward utilising the same suppliers, but there may be an existing debt attached that the Jets may previously have been used, but obviously with there being a new controlling company in charge of the Jets now, how does that relationship work?
Yeah, so it's a good question, right? And it's something that I've been open-eyed about coming into the role. So the answer is, it is a new entity. The four owners have invested in a new entity that's been given, in a very separate transaction, awarded the licence for the club. Martin, as we talked before, hadn't been paying his debt. So there are debts that exist that are attached to the old club. And in fact, we're not talking about investment. From a fan point of view, when you think about the business of the club, the owners are coming into this environment. We'd already played one game. We're into the season. There's obviously a cost base that's attached to the club around player salaries, staff salaries, other commitments, hire deals, etc. All those things are in place. But one of the difficult things is most of the revenue has actually already been taken by the old club. So all the majority of sponsorship fees, membership fees, have all been paid into the old entity. And that's improved the old entity's position. But for us, starting afresh, looking forward into the season, particularly this season, it's not that healthy cash flow position, because the monies that you'd ordinarily expect to see around sponsorship and membership, two main revenue streams, majority of that's already gone. So there is real investment required for this season to get through this season. Of course, there will be investment. We'll work hard to build off the foundations that's there, and membership will be really important to the club moving forward. I can tell you that. So we have to focus on membership, and we have to focus on our other revenue streams to support the club more broadly, to support the football program, and to make the club sustainable, basically, and attractive to other parties that might want to come in and be part of the club. So those things are a focus. One of the things I'll have to get to the other part of your question is, one of the things I'll have to be doing is identifying those key suppliers to the club and sitting, whilst there's a process that Martin and the liquidator that he's now appointed will work through in relation to those other parties, one of the things I want to do is sit down, particularly with the suppliers that are in the community and have worked with the club and supported the club in the past. I want to be able to sit down with them, look them in the eye, and talk about how we form a new relationship and how I support them moving forward. And I want to be able to do that in as positive a way as I can, without. But I have to be upfront about the fact that Martin was the previous owner, and he just simply didn't support the club, and he has left, unfortunately, a number of people out of pocket.
Yep, absolutely. All right. With regards to investment into the club going forward, what sort of areas are you anticipating that are going to require investment? Where's the money going to need to be spent? Because Obviously, it's been very apparent, especially since COVID hit, that the clubs had everything slashed, extra programs, and you see the benefits when, obviously we've been through all this before with a number of different owners, and an owner comes in, spends the money required, and then that keeps the club performs really well when the decent amount of money spent on it. And it was obviously seen most prevalently with the 2018 performance getting to the grand final. The club was properly resourced, coaching, ancillary staff, and all that sort of thing made the whole organisation run as it should. What areas are you looking? Is the current consortium looking to invest in to make sure that's going forward, or are you looking to keep it as lean as possible so that when a new ownership comes in, and we'll get to that in a minute, they can spend the money where it's required and build the club up to where they think it should be and in the areas they want to build it up?
Yeah, look, I think that the answer is the club has to be sustainable, right? It's a simple statement. So we're not a club, I think, where you've got owners that are just going to pour in a limit, like hose cash into the business, right, without expecting any sort of return or viability. So we have to work towards viability and sustainability. And to do that, I've already touched on the fact that membership will be really important to us. And we have to reconnect to our community, build a stronger relationship with participants and other football stakeholders in the region. We have to build a platform that will support commercial growth. So sponsorship and other commercial revenue streams are going to be really important. And those things will make the club sustainable. But they need investment to be able to unlock that value. You need investment. So, we do need to invest in our membership program. We need to invest in our commercial platforms, and there'll be other areas that we'll need to invest to create that sustainability. And that will, if we get that right, that's going to allow us to support the football program appropriately, because, ultimately, and I know everyone listening to this podcast is going to be concerned about on-field performance, right? And so the football team has to be competitive. We have to be there with a red hot crack at winning each match we go into. And, and at the start of the season, we need to all be able to believe that our team is going to make it right to the very end of the season and compete in the finals, right? And compete strongly. So we have to create an environment where that is that's something that our fans acknowledge. And so we've got to provide the right support. And to do all this, I think the other thing is this isn't just about the owners. This is actually about all the fans, the members, and all the supporters of the club. And we will all need to stand up and support the club moving forward. And this year, I know, is a challenge, right? We've got a COVID environment where, everyone who was either at the game or watching the game on Friday night could see that, unfortunately, and this is just the way the world is at the moment, of course, but we were down to 50% of capacity. We caused all sorts of problems for our members because of that change to go to 50%, and then to change again halfway through the week to 25%. I can't tell you how many headaches, and I'm sure it's caused a lot of headaches for people on this podcast that are members, but that's a very difficult environment to work in. I think hopefully now we've got the systems, or once I hopefully we have now got the systems now built to make the next game a much easier process for members. But for them, the reality is with the COVID distancing measures, we simply can't put members into the seats that they'd ideally want to be in, that they hope to be in, because that's just the way the world is now. We've got to comply with the COVID protocols. But this year will be a tough year because the Wanderers, that first home game against the Wanderers should have been a great crowd. Like it's something we would have all been looking forward to, I know. And sadly that, we were restricted in the number of people that could turn up. We were restricted in the lead time we had to promote it. We were restricted in what we could provide to members. So it was, it's a game where, for all those reasons, we weren't satisfied. And also from a financial point of view, it's going to be a different year for us, because we're going to have to be very, we're going to have to acknowledge that our revenue streams aren't going to be as strong from game day. And, one of the questions, be interested, perhaps off the back of this podcast, but one of the things that I've been thinking about and asked the team internally is, well, how do we, for membership, for instance, our membership numbers aren't where they were 2 or 3 years ago.
No.
And we have to think about how do we, we just can't. Well, I still don't know what the rest of the season is going to look like in terms of where we're playing and when. And the reality is that's probably going to chop and change around a little bit. So we can't, from a traditional membership point of view, we can't guarantee when a game's going to happen. We can't guarantee whether we're going to be getting to a point where you're going to put members back into their normal seats or not. So we do have to think about how do we engage and grow our membership base in an environment where that right to a seat is going to be a little challenge, right? Because the seat you want is not going to be necessarily available, and the preferred day that you'd like is not necessarily going to be delivered either. There's every chance that we're going to be constantly, you've already seen changes to the draw. And there's just another recent change. I expect that, we will be playing, there'll be Wednesday nights, there'll be adjustments, even, lunchtime on Friday, there was changes that came through because of the change in Queensland. So, this is, I think, one of the real positive things that could come off this sort of discussion is some input particularly from the members group about how do we build a strong relationship? How do we support our membership base in a year where that just sort of transaction around a right to a seat is going to be difficult? So what else can we do? Because I look at the South Sydney Rabbitohs, that was a really interesting process they went through when they started to shift this mindset within rugby league around members being just people that have an entitlement to a seat, and the Rabbitohs have shifted that much more towards being part of the club, and the seat entitlement was much less of a focus. And I think in this community, I can see the passion that exists amongst our fans and our members, and I can see the loyalty that exists in this community, and I can see the potential for the team, the club in this community as well. But we do have to think about how do we create a new model for membership that actually grows membership. We build a stronger connection to our members, and we put the club in. If we can do all that, we put the club in a much stronger position in terms of our future.
Just as a way of feedback, I think a lot of the commenting and stuff I saw online with regards to how the match was handled from a ticketing perspective, I think the main sort of issues were people who were members who then had to change their seats and weren't allowed to sit where they were allocated on their membership, were allocated to a lower grade area, but then saw that those same seats that they weren't allowed to sit in were then allocated for the $10 tickets. So somebody else could buy a seat either next to where they were sitting or their exact same seats, but they were sitting in a lower grade, and the couple of gold members had a bit of feedback. So that's just a bit of anecdotal feedback that I saw online.
Yeah, I think I can tell you I can tell you exactly what happened, which was as we moved into the game and the changes came through. The ticketing system struggled. This ticketing system, and we're frustrated by it, is just not as nimble as it should be. And what it meant was we couldn't. We needed to get tickets on sale, but the members actually had to be mapped in a different process, mapped into the stadium. So what we did, because we wanted to get tickets on sale, is we reserved the premium locations in the stadium for members, and we put all the other tickets on site. We opened up access to the other areas inside the stadium to just the GA purchasers, the general public. But there was one problem, which is when we did put those premium regions within the stadium on sale, and we communicated to members that they should use their code to get access to those tickets and purchase them, some general public were able, not because we didn't want this to happen, but because of the inflexibility in the ticketing system, there were some members of the general public that accessed through that little loophole basically we created through members. And that isn't something we wanted to happen. But with the timeframes and the lack of flexibility in the ticketing system, we couldn't stop it from happening. So it was one of those instances of making a decision of, look, most important thing is to give members access to these tickets as quickly as possible. And it wasn't identified that this loophole could exist to let some general public in. And we just had to accept that that was a limitation of the ticketing system and get on with it. And probably the other thing I'd say is that game, the first game, as looking to the new owners, they wanted to create an environment where the broader community was able to kind of come along at a cheaper price for one time only. I know that members are frustrated, or some members would be frustrated that the general public got access to cheaper tickets for that first game, but I can tell you it is a one time only thing, and the members are the foundation this club will be built on. And I want to talk more and engage more about, as I said before, what can we do to build a stronger relationship with our member base and to deliver more value aside from that seat at the game. So, so that's something that we'd like to do. We've talked about running some member forums and so sitting down face to face if we can, based on COVID, or maybe it'll be an online environment like this. But absolutely want to be open about. Open about the challenges we had this week, and it was pretty extraordinary because you think about all that COVID stuff on top of the fact that, and you hinted at this in your intro, but on top of that, I, as the exec chair of the new entity, I actually didn't have a hire on Monday. We were given the license by the FA. I did not have a hire deal for the stadium on Friday night. So, on top of all those COVID issues, we also actually had to go out and enter into a new relationship with the stadium. We had to enter into a new relationship with Ticketmaster for ticketing. So it was an extraordinary week, but we know now that we've got through that. And next week, a lot of those challenges are now behind us. And we're confident that moving into Sunday's game, we'll be able to deliver members. Again, I can't guarantee them that they'll get their seat because we know that won't happen because we'll have COVID issues, but we will have those premium sections that members, have bought into and that we want to deliver to them. They will be reserved, and that loophole I mentioned before has been. The simple fact is Ticketmaster needed time to be able to close that loophole, and it's now been closed.
Okay, good. That was actually going to be my follow-up question, so that answers that. So going forward, so we talked about some investment in, you talked about investment in membership and those sorts of areas. Looking at specifically things that can, before we get to players, what are we looking at? A couple of people asked about the status of the staff in the office, and a lot of people obviously wanting to know what the situation is going forward with Laurie. So can you answer what's
Sure.
the staff have obviously been put under a lot of pressure these last 12 months, and they've all performed really well. A lot of people really want to know whether they're going to be kept on going forward. And obviously Laurie being the face of the club up until this point has been obviously the one that most people have been asking about. But what's the status of the people in the office, and is there going to be any investment in that area to as part of plans going forward?
Sure. Yeah, and they're really important questions, right? And one of the things I should say is, so this is a fresh start for the club, right? And so we've got new owners that can deliver sustainability and we move forward. But it's really important to acknowledge that it's actually probably longer than the last 12 months, 2 years. It's actually been a long period of time that the club really has survived because of the hard work that's come from the team of people that sit in the admin staff. It's survived because of the leadership and the dedication of Laurie, and it's survived because of the support that the fans and members and sponsors. There's a whole lot. There's a whole lot have stood up and really, dug in hard to support this club and make sure that it's survived, right? And I know that's, looking forward, that is, that is why there is a foundation here that gives me that confidence that the club will have a really strong future. But it's important to recognise the efforts of the people that are listening. I know there's early days for me, but I've already met a few people I know that will be listening in on this podcast, right? And you can see the passion and dedication they have and love they have for the team. And, that's a great, it's great comfort to know that there's people like that I can rely on, and the broader team in the admin staff and football staff can rely on to be behind us. And we will be relying on you moving forward. So to answer the specific question, so our staff group, well, what happened last week, and I'll take you through it basically. So license was transferred on Monday. We immediately met with a player group, both the A-League squad and the W-League squad, with the FA. So Greg O'Rourke, from now the commissioner of the APLCO, came along to the meeting with Laurie and myself. We addressed the players, we told them what had happened, and gave them comfort that there's a strong group of owners and there will be investment moving forward to support them. We also gave them comfort that all those players would transfer. There's a clause within the contract that allows them to transfer over seamlessly into the new entity. And you always worry when these sort of things happen, even though the contractual structures sound. You always worry what happens with players when there's any sort of change. And I think the fact that player group transferred across as an intact squad, still very tight, still very committed to the club, is a great signal for the culture and the leadership that exists in that player group. And I think, again, I know the people listening in today would take great comfort from the fact that group stayed together. I know, you look backwards and you can see loss of players over time, loss of some good players, right? And it was really important to the owners and to myself that we were able to bring that squad across. The other thing that was really important to us was to be able to bring the staff across from the old business. So we have offered new contracts to all the staff members. So everyone that you've got a relationship with will be in the new club, in the new fresh club, and the leader of that business, Laurie, who's wonderful guy, and I've really enjoyed my time in the last week getting to know him, and I spent a lot of time with him, including I think we're talking every day, including Saturdays and Sundays at the moment. So I've got great respect. I actually had a little bit to do from sort of a one step removed with Laurie, in the past, and so I knew a bit about Laurie coming into this. I read a lot about what he's been doing with the club. And for me personally, I absolutely wanted Laurie. That was one of the questions I asked the owners as I was coming in. I wanted to make sure that in their minds, Laurie was part of the club moving forward. And fortunately, we've been in a position to be able to make sure that Laurie is part of the club. So I think that's one of the great things in terms of this shift is we're now in a position where Laurie's part of the club and we've got stability underneath the club to move forward. And it gives me comfort, and I think he will be wonderful. I could already I went to at the ground. I could was outside with Laurie talking to fans. We were inside the ground, interacting with the player group, but also going to the corporate boxes. You can see the connection he has to the political community. So he's a very, very important part of the club, and he will be part of the club moving forward.
Fantastic. Will it be in a sort of a similar role to what he was before, or do you anticipate maybe pivoting? And obviously he was the head honcho having to deal with everything. Now that you're here, you're able to take a lot of those things and manage those as part of your role. Do you anticipate Laurie's role will change going forward?
Yeah, I think I can, you're hinting towards the fact that I can take a bit of pressure off him, particularly on the financial side of things. But there's some of that, like from a strategic point of view, you go back to what I was saying about the importance of building a strong strategy and then starting to execute on that strategy. That's part of what I will be doing, but Laurie will be a big part of that, and I want him to work alongside me through all those different elements. The relationship he has, the understanding he has of the political environment, the broader landscape. He's got a great knowledge of football as well. So all of those skills and that knowledge are things that I'll be drawing on as we move forward.
Fantastic. Now, there's been a lot of talk in the media about Gary Van Egmond coming in for his third coaching stint around the club. Obviously, you can confirm or deny that if you want, that's up to you. I don't want to step on anything that might be going on behind the scenes. But is there plans for the club to appoint a coach for the next 2 years? Is there plans to add to the coaching staff and not have the director of football operations and the academy, one of the academy coaches coaching the first team? What's the sort of plans with regards to the coaching staff of the players going forward?
Sure. So look, and this is a really important question, right? So I can tell you that there's a very strong process. So yes, we are going to address the coach question, but we're not going to do that. We're not going to be shooting from the hip and making decisions on any name that floats around through the papers or any other means. So we've defined a process that we're working through. We're very early stage of that process, but we will be in effect creating a criteria that we will apply against candidates. So there's a number of names that float around, and I can tell you we won't go into this with a narrow view. We will have a broader view of who candidates should be. We'll have a defined criteria for the sort of coach and the sort of football we want to play, and how that coach interacts with the rest of the club and connects to community and all those sort of things. So it has to be someone that is right for the Newcastle Jets, right?
Yep.
And we'll work through a process of assessing those different parties and making a decision. But we want to do that pretty quickly, right? Because if we're sitting here in April having this conversation, we will have failed, right? Because we've got to get on with this as well.
Does that, with the consortium looking to appoint a coach, does that mean that the ownership situation is now for this particular entity more of whereas it might have been seen before as a short-term thing, as a bridge to getting to a new permanent owner, this is going to be more of a medium term? You may be looking at 12 to 18 months, maybe 2 years before we can find the process and get the process sorted for a new permanent, get it transitioned away from current A-League investors to a new investor coming in and taking on this role on their own, rather than other clubs needing to be involved in the survival of the Jets.
Yeah, look, there's a couple of elements there in your question, right? Number one is, if we have a well thought through and robust process around selecting the right coach, then it doesn't matter who the owners are. That we'll get to the right decision, we would hope, or there'll be enough. We will have done everything we can to set ourselves up for success in terms of the coach, right? There's probably something that I'm sure you would have got some questions about within this, which is that the investor group, the owner group, clearly they've got links to other clubs.
Yeah.
So that there will be the process I've described will have a sort of a governance layer wrapped over the top of it to make sure that ultimately it's the decision around the coach and the assessment of different coaching options, etc., is removed from the ownership group, so that we can, as a club, and the people that are involved in this decision, and there'll be Laurie and myself and some others, but we will be independent from that investor group. So we're not, there's no risk there of one of the owners of one of the other clubs, either steering us away or towards someone that they think is the right person.
Yep.
We'll be running an independent process that, based on as I described it, will get to the right answer, we believe.
Does that go, just to interject there, does that go for as a whole of, so the entire club's been sort of ring fenced, as it were, from, or isolated from the ownership group that's funding the club, so that there's no hint of interference or any of those.
Yeah. Look, I think there's some ways that, so the interests of the owners, I think in a broader business sense, that connection can be really valuable to us, right? So if you think about the business side of the club, looking at best-in-class membership programs, so Sydney FC might, for instance, have the very best membership program. So we've got an ability to, I can ring now the CEO of Sydney FC and say, take some advice on how they've structured that. So there's closer relationship for us to some of the other A-League clubs than there has been in the past. There's still a good spirit of cooperation across the whole league, but I know when I ring the Western Sydney Wanderers, for instance, and ask a business question, my call will be answered, and we'll share what we can share, right? That's the business of the club, and I think that would benefit the club, the Jets, moving forward. From a football point of view, I think it's really important to this club and to our community to know that those football decisions, the on-field decisions, belong inside the club, but they're not influenced by the other owners that have links to other clubs, right? So that's the approach we're taking. And I think that's important to understand. And I do think it's already in the week that we've been in, I can see the benefit on the non-football side of being able to lean on those owners for guidance or use their IP around other things, right? And even, to be honest, even thinking about creating the right process to select or to deal with a coaching question, I've been able to talk to the other clubs and ask them, well, what process, tell me about the process you use to get to the right answer, right? So that's been helpful. So of course that's just the process, and then we take that and we apply it and we make that independent inside our club. So very important, and I think it's really important for our, everyone involved in the club to know that football side of the business has independence, and there's governance and management structures that sit around it to make sure that it will be independent.
All right, cool. Sorry to derail you from the
That's all right. And then so you asked, and then the second part of your question was around the owners and the path, moving forward.
Yep.
And so to talk about that, so I was touching on this before, but the four owners see the potential of this region, and they see this as a wise investment. Of course, it's important for them, for the Jets to be strong, because that's good for the competition, but in its own right, they see the fact that investing in the Jets is a wise investment. So they see the potential here in this region. They're not short-term investors, so they're not here with a sort of 6-month time frame to get out. They're here and they're prepared to invest for the long term, but they also acknowledge that it will be important for the Jets' future to develop a ownership group that's not just those four clubs.
Yeah.
So they want to move to local interest in time, but we've got time to do that.
Yeah.
So there is no, I'm not going to talk about timeframes on this,
Yep.
and I think it's important that we don't, because we don't want to be in a position where we're rushing under some artificial timeframe to, either, or just to make decisions around owners. We've got time to and it's important to recognise we actually have to. We've secured the club, we've created stability, but we now need to start to build off that platform, start to build those commercial programs. We have to start building our membership.
Yeah.
We have to start creating a sustainable club, and that will be important in terms of interest from other parties in being owners. And it will be important also for us, and I think for all the fans and members of the club, to know that when we do think about other owners, that we're thinking about the right owners, right? And we've got a model now with the commitment, and as I said, it's not a short-term commitment, but with the commitment we have from the new ownership group, we've got an ability to take smaller steps in terms of bringing other interests into the club. So we don't have to look for some sort of Hail Mary from someone from the US or UK or Asia to come in and buy the whole club. And I think, I know the Jets have experienced the pain of that and seen that doesn't necessarily work. So we've got an ability, as I said, to start taking some smaller steps. So we could find an individual that might want to, basically step in small steps. We can find a number of different businesses or individuals that want to be involved. But that's, the objective is to get people that know the community, they know football, they have comfort that, they're going to bring the right skills, and they have comfort that they can see the growth that can happen around this club. and that they will ultimately always support the ongoing sustainability and competitiveness, right? Competitiveness is an important word, right? It's not about, we don't just want to be here, but we want to be competing, right? And so that they're the, overarching, it's early days, of course, but they're the overarching points I'd make around that investment side of the club, the equity side of the club moving forward.
So with all being said, would now be the appropriate time for the Jets to be looking at involving a community ownership component in the club? Is that something that the...
Yeah, well, look, we haven't got any predetermined view on the model moving forward, I think there's some work that would need to be done on understanding how we can make that work. In some ways, membership, I was talking about what's membership look like before, right? So, is that a variation of membership, or is it something different? There's all those things are things that we will want to look at in time. There is no predetermined view, but if like the key point is that the club's future will be built off the engagement of our membership base and the engagement of the community. And whatever form that takes, that will be critical to our future. So we want to work through that.
Yep. There's been proposals, and a friend of mine from a number of seasons ago now, Toby raised floated the idea of a supporters trust being involved in some capacity of an investment component in the club. It was never sort of taken up because that was around the sort of time Nathan Tinkler took over, and he wasn't really sort of interested in having other partners on the benches. So Toby, if you're listening, mate, now might be the time to make contact, and I've got Shane's number so I can make those introductions.
Yeah. But I have, Grant, I've already received an email from someone that I haven't been able to respond to yet, but earlier in the week that suggested, provided me some notes and thoughts on that. So, there's, they're things that we'll look at in time, but, I would say nothing's off the table. I can't make any guarantees, but we'll look at different models, and that's something that we'll be focusing on.
Well, it might be an interesting way for the other clubs that are involved in the consortium to see whether a community ownership or community portion ownership might be an option in the A-League going forward. So that might be a good little test case for the A-League. We don't know. Now, just as a separate question, obviously it was well publicised that there were three clubs, investors from three clubs, Sydney FC, Western Sydney Wanderers and Western United. You did mention four. Is the fourth a silent partner, or are you able to say who the fourth club?
At this point in time, they're silent. Yep. So, they're not, I'm sure people will be interested when they finally, I think at some point in time, they will clearly not be silent anymore, but there's it's an A-League club, right? So there's not that many options, right?
There's only a certain number of options that can pick. Yep. Going back to the coaching. So, would there be? Is there going to be any expansion of the coaching staff, as it were? So, obviously, going back to a component of the question that I think I might have got you sidetracked from. Is there going to be look at expanding any of the coaching staff, bringing in some extra people to do with strength and conditioning and physio and all those sorts of, like these 1% and 2% department areas in the football department that just give the club and give the players that extra little bit to help them succeed further. Because usually when clubs get into financial difficulty, those sorts of 1% and 2% programs are the things that get cut. And that starts to slow decline, and the club then starts to, suffer from results. The players don't recover as well. Is that an area of investment that that's going to be looked at?
Yeah, look, well, we want the team to be competitive, both A-League and W-League. So we're going to make sure they have the right resources. The first step is look at the coaching role, and then we'll build put the right resource around that coach. We recognise that, right now we've got people covering different roles, and that's something obviously is not sustainable. So that's all recognised, and it's something we'll address as we move forward.
Okay. Obviously, we've made an announcement with regards to a player signing earlier on in the week. Can you have a talk to us about that announcement, and are there looking to be any other player signings made during the January transfer window?
So there was one that came out on Friday. Is that the one you're Perso, yeah. So look,
Was that in place before you came on board, or was that happened afterwards?
it was something that was moving before I think it was moving before we came on, before we came in. But there are other things that we're in discussion around. Well, we're in a position now where we can start. I think the football department basically had been a mode of kind of put everything on ice. We can't move forward. They weren't in a position to be able to progress a number of things they wanted to progress, and we're now, as of Monday, we've been able to say, okay, where are you on certain things? Can we, start to try and progress those things? So I think the members and fans should know that we're now flipped into a mode where we can start making some progress in terms of the team, whether that's doing things like extending contracts and securing the squad for the future, or whether it's making changes that relate to this season. But again, if we're looking at the coaching role, we need clarity on who that person is, and then that coach is going to have a view on, does he need strength, to strengthen a particular position, or what is it he needs? So there's actually a bit of a sequencing issue here where the coach issue needs to be answered first, really, before we start to think about talent. And whether they're players at the club that we're talking about extending, or I imagine other players that you'd like to attract to the club, they're all going to want to know who the coach is before they make any commitment.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just a shame this didn't happen a couple of weeks earlier than it did, because we're big fans of a certain coach over in Japan called Arthur Papas, hoping he was going to come home. Unfortunately, he signed with the J2 club, I think. So, unfortunately, it's not going to be Arthur Papas, but there's certainly a number of coaches out there, including Gary, who would be good fits for the role. But it's going to be interesting to see how things develop on that side going.
Yeah. I can look at what I've said. You may not be surprised to hear that I've been asked about the coach a lot.
Yep.
And what I can tell you is that when we get to the point where we make that decision, it won't be based on some subjective view of who we think's a good bloke, or who we think, whatever that subjective basis may be. It'll be based on some science. So we will have, as I said before, we will have defined the sort of person, the sort of coach that we need, and the coach that we think will be right for this club, and that will drive through an answer. And so that person, and I'm sure in these sort of decisions, there's always people that aren't happy with the outcome, but it will be, there will be science that gets us to that end point.
Well, it's a good thing you've still got Laurie involved, because he was very successful in the previous coaching appointment. Just a shame that the coach chose to leave after a couple of months. But we'll leave that aside. You did mention, obviously, that the player contracts did transfer between the old and the new. What does that mean for the players that we currently have out on loan? Is there any sort of other legal issues, or did they all transfer across as well? I'm talking about players like Joey Champness, who's currently up in Brisbane, James Donachie over in the IPL. And are you currently aware of the status of Matt Miller? Because from our last conversation with Laurie, his deal was ended on the 1st of January, and we were expecting him back, but there's not been any sort of talk about where he is at the moment.
Yeah, well, I won't go into individual players, but I can tell you that the contractual status hasn't changed. So if there was a contractual right, or relationship that existed to the old entity, then those under the standard playing contract, those rights and responsibilities transfer across into the new entity. So, and then in discussions like that, we'll talk about, what's happening at the appropriate time. But it'll become a long conversation. You'll probably, and I'm careful at this point in time not to wade into areas that I may not yet be fully briefed on. But we'll come, look forward to be able to answer those questions in time and make announcements in time about where we are with, player announcements and hopefully some positive shifts.
Yep, no, that's fair enough. Like we said, we knew that there's some questions you weren't going to be able to go into as much detail as some people might like, but we do really appreciate the time you've been able to give us. We'll just quickly see if there's any other questions here. We've gone into details on all of the questions that were put through most of the Facebook. Actually, the one interesting question, I suppose, was from Matthew. There were reports the last potential buyers pulled out because Jets weren't able to produce audited financial accounts. The gentleman basically asked, is this a situation that's going to be rectified so that that's not going to be a problem going forward if we're looking at bringing other investors or looking to transfer to a new owner from the current entity down the line?
Yeah, look, I don't know the status of those previous conversations, but I can tell you that we're building a sustainable club. We've got a strong foundation. We're here. We're serious about this. The investors are very serious about this as well. And at the appropriate time, when we have those conversations, I can tell you that they will be done off the back of we're very clear, solid financials, and importantly, and I think this is important, a view of the future, right? Because some of that, we'll have some things that we will want to put in place, and we may only just be starting down the path of building value in certain areas. But we will have. It's important that we define those things. We have a clear focus on what it is we want to achieve, and we're now starting out on that process. So we break out of this cycle where the old club was in, which is understandable, and that cycle was merely about getting to the next week or the next month or the end of that season, and we're now in a cycle where we could start to build off a solid foundation.
Absolutely. I suppose I'm just looking through most of these questions, and it looks like we've pretty much covered most of them off. People ask, I suppose the other sort of major question that people were asking, and a lot of fears around the place, Simon Ferrari on Facebook asked, can you confirm that the license itself will stay in Newcastle if and when there's any sort of transfer of ownership to a new group? Is that a condition going, like if we're 2 years down the line and the current entity is still in charge of the Newcastle Jets, is there any danger of, the license might get pulled and then moved to another area? There's another comment made on our Facebook forums that the area in Newcastle has been well supported by members, over 10,000 members, third highest, fourth highest in the league in some seasons. There's been the club's, when it's been properly invested in, has gotten to a grand final. It's won a grand final. The team is successful when it's properly resourced and financed. I suppose the two parts of the question is, let me jump in.
Sorry, I'll jump in. But the owners are investing because of Newcastle, right? They're here because they see this opportunity that exists in this region, and so my role is to make sure that we can build value up through this region, and the membership numbers you're talking about, and the great history the club has, and we want to set it up to have a great future as well. So we're here because it is Newcastle. We're not here because it's a license that can be traded to some place down the road. So the absolute focus is taking this foundation that's already here and building real financial strength from that, and building a competitive team that will compete and have a proud history moving forward as well. So I think that's that's the answer, right? We need support. We need to get back to 10,000. There's no reason why we can't be back at 10,000 plus members, and I think we're going to find our path back to that quickly. And I look forward to feedback and thoughts that can come through this group. And Grant, if you can feed us, if you can play a role in filtering that back through. But very happy to talk about that, and very happy to come back into this podcast or stream, or into an open forum if we can open forum. But actually, it's the people that are listening now. They're going to be a critical part of the club's future, and we all have to work together, and it's going to be responsibility of all of us to really, push hard and create the right financial structures and the right levels of support and the right commitment from the community to deliver this club that competitive and competitive nature and success moving forward.
Well, I was going to ask what would be your final message from supporters for supporters as a way to wrap this podcast up, but I think that's pretty much nailed it. So I really have to thank everybody for their submissions of questions. Hopefully, we've sort of covered all of the relevant topics in as this interview's gone on. So if there's anything we've missed, I do apologise, and hopefully we can revisit that at a later stage. But I think we've pretty much covered off all of the major topics that everybody had, and we thank everybody across Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and the newcastlefootball.net/forums. And we also have to thank Shane for making his time available and being very open with his answers, and as open as he can possibly be. Mate, it's very positive. I really appreciate the answers you're able to give and the detail you're able to go into. So I really appreciate your time, and thank you for joining us.
No problems. Look, I'm happy to be involved. Happy to come back again if I haven't put everyone to sleep. I'll definitely come back on again. And thanks again to everyone that's listening in. Like, as I said before, you guys, you're the people that have got this. You've supported the club to this point in time. You've created something special. I know we've had a bumpy road, but we really have an opportunity now. And if we all stand up and commit to this club moving forward, I think there's some wonderful things that we can do.
All right, Shane, thank you for your time. Thank you very much.
Thanks.